Wipeout, a fantastic racing series that has managed to survive for a while now. It's one of those games that sucks you into its futuristic world and keeps you there thanks to the great gameplay and the soundtrack, which always puts a smile on my face. Today then, we will look at Wipeout 2097 or Wipeout XL if you live in the United States. This game is usually called one of the best games in the series, and today I want to revisit this sequel and see if this statement holds up today. A twist, however, is we will also compare the PS1 original with a port that appeared on the Sega Saturn. Which of the two should you aim to buy? What are the differences between the two? Let's find out. Alright, let's talk about the game first, starting with the PS1 version. The intro FMV looks pretty good. It's nice and simple with a really cool electronic soundtrack in the background. I also need to say, even the title card looks badass. I mean, come on, that's looking nice. The menu itself has that 90s futuristic look, but it also manages to not look flashy or complicated. Nice and simple, driving the point home without making players wonder how to actually start a race. Sadly, not a lot to do here, just the arcade mode, 6 tracks with different difficulty settings and 4 different ships. Yes, Wipeout 2097 seems pretty Spartan, but don't worry, wait until the game starts. Also, just notice the Red Bull advertising here. It's all over the place, and it definitely worked. The Americans only found out what Red Bull was thanks to this game, which is saying a lot. Anyhow, the gameplay. This is a track-based racing game where you need to finish in the highest position that you can manage while trying to beat the clock. Yes, if you're not quick enough, you will lose to a clock, so try to make that not happen. In Wipeout games, the trick is to use the power of the craft with the air brakes. The air brakes can be used individually from one another. In other words, you can activate the left or right side brakes to aid you in cornering, or you can press both to slow you down for tight bends. Using these effectively and carefully will see you through the corners. This game is not forgiving should you choose to not use the brakes. You'll come to an almost dead stop if you make contact with a wall. You can sometimes get lucky and scrape the wall, but don't count on it. Unlike the original Wipeout, this one introduced the energy meter, or a health meter in other words. This means too much damage will see your craft destroyed and thus a restart will be needed. Luckily for you, this means weapons are now more than just a nuisance. You can actually blow up your competition and knock them out of the race entirely. There's a few different power-ups to use, including these blue arrows for a burst of speed, and then you have different weapons such as missiles, rockets, turbo boosts, shields, mines, and a few more. The best one is autopilot, which not only steers your craft for you, but also speeds through everything as well. The downside is it only lasts around 3 seconds and will turn off at the worst time, such as in mid-corner. Still handy, mind you. There's also a pit lane now to repair any damage taken, which is handy, although it uses a longer lane than just going straight to the finish, meaning that you could easily lose a place as a result. Oh, and you can pitch your craft up and down, which I found handy on this track here with its very sharp jumps, thus keeping my speed up. So that's the basics covered, now let's get technical. First, the gameplay is sharp and satisfying as heck. The controls work so well and feel natural here, almost like I'm one with the craft. The air brakes are very powerful and taking advantage of them is not a problem. I'll admit, a newcomer will find the game very challenging at first and perhaps will complain of the steep learning curve, but once you realise those air brakes, the game is a breeze. The response times are a dream too, adding to the confidence that you really can take these corners at breakneck speeds. The track designs are mostly narrow and closed off, which adds to the sense of speed but also reminds you that your room for error is small. Again, hitting the walls in this game will be a common occurrence. There's also jumps and gaps to navigate, and of course other races that will be out to end your racing days. Thankfully for you, if a weapon gets used, an announcer will warn you ahead of time. Isn't he a helpful chap? Speaking of that, the speeds that you can achieve are insane! Over 400 kilometers an hour? Holy shit, look how fast it is! Man, I love the rush I get from just doing this. I tell you, not many racing games get the speed rush correctly, and yet this game gets it bang on right. The sound effects though really need a special mention. I really like the bloops and bleeps throughout the game, from the menu sound effects, to the funk sound of hitting walls, to the announcer, and other suitable sound effects that really help Wipeout feel alive here. I can't get enough of them either, it's just so much fun to listen to. But as great of all of that is, the soundtrack. My god, it's awesome! It's mostly licensed from many different artists, but every song is fantastic and fits the game perfectly. Every song is electronic greatness from start to finish. Wipeout 2097 easily has one of the best soundtracks on the PlayStation, and it still holds up today. It's timeless for a reason. This game wouldn't be the same without this wonderful soundtrack in the background. We cannot forget about the graphics. The game looks great, easily more detailed than the original, with lovely lighting effects used throughout the game. I love the thrust light that emits from the crafts, and the tracks are full of life and personality. The only thing I'm not sure about are the explosion effects. That looks weird to me, almost out of place somewhat. Otherwise, for a late 90s effort, I can't find anything to complain about. Oh, and the game sticks to its frame rate and it's as smooth as butter. It makes playing the game even more fun. Okay, so that's Wipeout 2097 in a nutshell. Great game and still plays beautifully today. Now, let's check out the Sega Saturn version. Right, here we are, and I'm sad to report things aren't looking good here. The FMV is of lower quality than the PS1 version, but nobody cares about that. Then you get to the main menu and it does look pretty good, so my fears here were put aside for the moment. There's even different music in the menu, which is interesting. More on that later. But when we start the game, oh boy, where the heck do I start? Well, the frame rate is the biggest difference. It's very choppy and runs at a lower frame rate than the PS1 version.
Missile.
Actually, it runs the same as the original on the Sega Saturn. How did they not improve on this aspect? It makes looking at the game in motion very difficult to do, and it's really disappointing. The graphics themselves are great for the Sega Saturn, albeit with some issues when transparency effects are involved, but it's still not quite as good looking compared to the PlayStation version. The popping is also more noticeable, and enemy ships are less detailed overall. Also notice the game looks more jaggy compared to its smoother PS1 counterpart. Oh, and no Red Bull advertising in this port either. I wonder why only the PlayStation version got the Red Bull endorsement. What else is different? The sound effects are slightly different in some areas. The funk sound is slightly different sounding. and the sound effects where echoes occur are more pronounced on the PlayStation version.
Rocket build.
I also noticed when using autopilot on the Sega Saturn, the sounds pretty much cut out and the craft hardly speeds up, whereas on the PS1 version, the sounds are all intact and the craft really takes off.
Autopilot engaged.
The Saturn port also has more glitches and it's easier to run out of time, I find. You get the sense that the developers who ported this didn't quite get the best out of the Sega Saturn, almost as if compromises had to be made at every turn. The Saturn port also has no 2-player mode of any kind, which is very sad to see omitted. The PS1 version did have it, albeit you needed to connect to TVs and PlayStations to make it work. The Saturn port also has no extra content and it takes a few more seconds to restart a race, although loading into a new race from the menu is quicker than the PS1 version, so that's a plus. Some of the effects have also taken a hit too. The explosions look really out of place now, and some of the light source effects don't seem to occur anymore. At this point, most of you probably think the Saturn port is a write-off and is without doubt a waste of time. Well, think again, because the Saturn port is actually better than it looks. You see, despite the bashing I inflicted on it, this game is still amazing. The controls, although slightly worse, the air brakes themselves feel more natural and easier to use here. Doing tight turns on this port are simply a joke to me. Yes, the frame rate is a disaster, but so what? The speed is still here, if not more so, and at least it's consistent so nothing on the control department changes during gameplay. Pretty much everything that made the PS1 version amazing is still here and intact, so you get a fast and furious game that will challenge you right to the end. The same great courses are also here and nothing has been altered. In other words, you can play both versions and you won't be missing out on anything. The soundtrack though. I knew cold storage was a genius, but the music here is so well made. The Saturn version didn't get the PS1 soundtrack, so cold storage composed all of the music just for the Saturn. Clearly, he loved the system because the soundtrack is just marvellous. It's hard to explain, but when I hear it, I just feel at peace somehow. The songs are more chilled out and easy on the ears, yet still manage to be engaging with great build-up and great instrumentals. It's far more original, creative, and I have to argue, it might even be better than the PS1. Yes, I know I will get downvoted and everything for saying that, but I really do think it's better. I was more engrossed and played for longer just to keep hearing it. It's spectacular. But look, it's pretty clear that the Saturn is outclassed, and it doesn't help that this port is 3 times more expensive compared to the PS1 version. However, if you take a chance on it, the Saturn port will certainly put a huge smile on your face. So, that was Wipeout 2097 for you folks, and it was neat to see the PS1 and Sega Saturn versions in action. As mentioned before, the Saturn version is ultimately a tougher sell for most people, but it's still a class game with a brilliant soundtrack and great gameplay. Sometimes you really have to look past technical limitations to unearth a great game. Still, I urge most people who would like to try this game out, direct yourself to the PS1 version and be happy you played a great racing game that still holds up today. Alright, let me know what you thought of Wipeout 2097 for the Sega Saturn and PS1, and until my next video, I will see you soon.